Hey everybody, we're back on the FE number 1 build today. Hope everybody's having a great day. And today is going to be the next to the last of the assembly. I'm going to go ahead and get the push rods in it, go over some of the questions that's been asked, discuss a little bit of how come I didn't do more with the geometry on this one. And the only thing left to do, and we're having a little clearance issue and we got to get it back in the chassis and look at it, but we're probably going to have to put a remote oil filter on this one. And like I said, later when we can show you the rest of the truck, if the owner's okay with that, then I'll go into some of those details of some of the decisions that were made in the outside of the engine here. Big question that keeps popping up. How can I put mechanical valve train rocker arms on a hydraulic system? Well, it's a real simple answer. The hydraulic lifter doesn't care what rocker arms up here. Some of that notorious after-build ticking that comes from these engines, as I said in the pushrod measuring video, comes from the pushrod length not being measured correctly to make up for changes in dimensions from machine work done. Using these adjustables lets you set each one just as if it had pedestal mount or stud mount rockers, modern style roller rockers, whatever, on any engine. You turn them until they quit ticking, give them a quarter turn. This is going to let us take the dial indicator, set each one at 55,000 right in the middle of the lifter preload. We can set it right at 55 thousandths, and then that gives us the adjuster nuts up here to take out any possible ticking we may have, and you can basically be infinitely adjustable to get your hydraulics set up not ticking and get your zero lash out here at the tip. Now, another question I got asked was about geometry on these. And I'm going to have to take the camera down for a second to do this one. Let's talk about geometry. We didn't put a very high lift cam in this. It's only got a 494 lift. Now, that's a little higher than stock, but we should be okay. This manifold's been highly modified in the past and the pushrod holes have been opened. But we're going to keep an eye out for clearance on things when we start it. Now, if you notice, on these FE rocker arms, these are stock FE rocker arms. They have a very wide, very particularly curved tip on them. And what that was for was the same rocker arm went on all the engines, basically, except for the adjustable part for the solid applications, no matter what the lift of the cam was. And that little parabolic arc right there, parabolic arc, will keep that valve tip, pretty much keep that rocker right in the middle of that valve tip. It's close enough that it doesn't hurt anything. A few people have asked about the Carter key, cotter pin, whichever you'd like to call it. That is to keep the oil galley plug from popping out the end of the rocker shaft. These rocker shafts are hollow all the way through. They have holes in the bottom of them to oil the rocker arms, and I'll pull one off here in a minute and turn it up so you can see it. Okay, so something to keep in mind. When you put this thing on, these shafts do have an orientation to them. This little hole right here with this little slot across it, that's how the rockers oil. That needs to be to the bottom. You don't want it to the top, you want it to the bottom. Now, another thing you have to watch out for is on the hole, and I think I mentioned this before. This stud on this side and this stud on this side is where your oil comes up from the block through the head and into your rocker shaft to oil your valve train. You have to make sure that hole's not blocked. The Edelbrock stud kit kind of solves that problem in that they're all skinnier than the stock bolts. But if you're using the stock bolts, one is thinner than the rest, and it has to go in that hole or you will starve the top for oil and tear your engine up. Now, another thing you have to do when you're putting these on, the way to do it is to get your push rods in place. As a matter of fact, let me grab some push rods. So another thing we did was we modified the oil drain back pan to keep it. It doesn't exactly fit with the Edelbrock's larger diameter valve springs. With some of these solid style rockers, they have a little extra boss down here in the bottom of them that makes them marginally stronger and they can hit. So we went ahead and scalloped it out. The deflector shields here help keep oil running back down into the return holes instead of running down along the head here, and helps cut down on the chance of having a valve cover leak. Although this will get plenty of oil in it, and it will drain back down this drain hole here and over here on the end. There's one on each end, and then there's the ones along the top here. But you want to try to keep as much of it up here as you can, and that'll run down into the lifter valley and run back to the bottom. There's nobody sponsoring this video. These are comp cam push rods. We had them special made for this thing after the measuring the other day. And with the hydraulics, it's easy to see if you got them in the right place. Just drop them in the hole. Don't let them go, because if you drop one, they can find their way down into the valley pan on these, and it's a little tricky to get them out sometimes. We're going to work our way across, put each one in place, make sure I'm in the lifter. That's why I'm pushing. You can feel the little give. Now these lifters were pre-oiled, so some of them are a little harder than others. See, there we go. That one skipped out. There it goes. Make sure I didn't bump that one when that happened. So we make sure we're in there. And then you can just kind of take your flashlight and shine down. Just make sure you're in the lifter. That's the main thing. Now when you're doing solids, it's a little hard to do that because, well, they don't give. They're solids. So you just kind of got to get a light and do the best you can. But make sure you hit it. It's not impossible. You just got to be on target. Now we're ready to set this back on. And I pulled this off, so that means it moved and none of the holes are lined up anymore. So you try to get them as lined up as you can, and then work your way back onto the studs. And there we go. And it'll work its way down, and you may have to pick it up and down a time or two. There. Now we're going to go ahead and push these rockers back and let the adjuster balls get into the cups of the push rods. Now what that's going to do is help keep the push rods from moving around. Now the next couple of steps are really critical on these. This rocker shaft will bow if you were to like just tighten this end down and then go tighten this end down, because it's got all the weight of this valve train on it. So what you want to do is get them in place, just kind of give them a push. Now we've got all of these little adjuster nuts basically at the same height, and we're going to move them, but that's our starting point. Okay, so once again we got our luber plate out, and I'm going to push up each rocker, and I'm going to give it a little shot. Push that rocker back down. Now this one's kind of stuck because that's where that rod's at, so we'll pick up the whole shaft, give it a little shot, let it fall back in. Same thing here. Now you can walk along as you do it. You can do it when you first put the push rods in before you put the rockers down. It works either way. Just give them a good little shot of luber plate. Put a little too much on that one, but better to have too much than too little in this situation. Put a little shot on the valve. Since we're there, won't hurt anything. Push the rocker shaft back down. Wipe the goop off. Then we're going to put a little shot of ARP lube on top of each pedestal. Now one thing that we could have done to these that we didn't do, and that's another question that's come up, is using like the Precision Oil or the Survival Motorsports. Once again, this is not a sponsored video. Shaft supports for the end. That adds longevity to the engine, but in this case it's something we can go back and add later. The primary use for this engine really is not going to warrant having it, but we may go back later. That's going to be up to the owner when the time comes. So another little tip to save materials. Take your little ARP lube bags and put them in these little Ziplocs. Keeps the dirt out, keeps them clean, and you can use them more, get more distance out of them. And I'm going to go down here and give this a nice little shot of ARP lube. Edelbrock says to torque these to 35 pounds if you're using the lube. If you're just using regular oil, torque them to 40 to 45 pounds. Because the moly in the ARP lube does lubricate and cut down friction that much. And I think we got about all we're going to get out of this pack. And you want to make sure to coat the surface good and get it in the threads of the studs. The washers have a taper to them. The taper goes up. I'm going to put one on each one. Then we're going to put a little more ARP lube on. Go ahead and start all nuts. Just run it down till you feel it touch. Okay, so now that we've got them all in place and they're lubed, you want to just take your fingers and turn the nuts down until they touch. Now this goes back to that. This is where you can bend these rocker shafts. You want to make sure your plate's lined up. And what you want to do is go, if you feel it tighten up, you can go a full revolution to see. I felt it snug up. As soon as you feel it snug up, move on to the next one. And there went that one. And we're going to work our way a half a turn, full turn, whatever we can get, all the way down this thing. Just keep going back and forth until we bottom it out, so as not to bend this rocker shaft. And as it gets closer to the bottom, you'll get more resistance because you're picking up the load of the valve train. And I'm just literally turning this, and you notice I'm not stopping at the same point each time. I'm turning it as the load changes. And that's all we're getting. So now we're going to go in and torque it in the same way. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to pull it down. That's probably about 25 pounds on it right now. So I'll set it for 30, and then I'll set it for 35. Okay. Let me get my torque wrench. I'm going to lock her on 30. See, that squeezed it down that much more. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and go down here to the end and give it a, yep. Now see, as I pulled those down to 30, you notice this end moved. That's everything. Oh, there's 30. And there's 30. That was the last little bit, and we kept going that way, and we're about as even as we could get. So now I'll go ahead and take her up to 35. 35, 35, 35, and 35. That shaft is in. So I'll back my torque wrench off. We'll lay it over here on the bench and let it rest for about a half hour or so while I set up the other side. And this is one of those things. If you had two torque wrenches or you did both sides at once, you'd go ahead and go 30-30 and then go 35-35. But I'll spare you all that since we're doing the same thing on the other side. In the next episode, we set the lifter preload, answer some more questions, and get her all ready to button up. Thanks for watching. Practice your skills or learn a new one. Either way, turn them into craftsmanship. You never know how far they will take you. Have a great day. Until next time.